What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video we're going to create the sign up page and then actually use Firebase Authentication to get a user signed in with their email and password. So looking at our XD design, what we're going to be doing is creating these two pages here, the sign up and sign in. We're not going to do the Google and Facebook in this video, but we're just going to do the email and password sign up and sign in. All right, let's get started. First thing we're actually going to do is go ahead and import the Firebase Auth plugin. So Firebase Auth is what we're going to be using to authenticate. And again, this makes it quite simple to do email password authentication as well as anonymous authentication and Google sign in and Facebook sign in. It actually allows for quite a few different types of sign in. So if you open up the Firebase console here, there is a bit we're going to have to do. If you go under authentication, and hit set sign up methods, these are pretty much all the types of sign in that we could do. This video we're going to be doing the email password, so turn that on. Later we'll do a Google and a Facebook sign in and actually an anonymous sign in as well. But for right now, just make sure the email password one is enabled, and you can see we don't have any users yet. So by the end of this video, hopefully we will have a user in there. We're going to actually create another new folder, and this folder is going to be, we're going to call it our services. And what this is going to hold is kind of like all our pretty much business logic side of code. So it's not actually these services files are not going to be, they're not going to be viewed, so it's going to be kind of back-end logic in a way, or really just any code logic in general. So this one will do an auth service, and then this will hold all of our, pretty much all our Firebase calls that are all our database calls that have to do with authentication, and then that way we can just call these functions in our views, so it kind of keeps it in two separate areas. So we're going to need to import that new Firebase package that we just installed, which is actually Firebase Auth, like that. And then we're going to create this new class. So it's going to be, let's just call this the auth service. And notice it's not a widget. This is just a class of functions that we can use elsewhere in our other widgets, pretty much. The first thing we want to actually do is create an instance of the Firebase Auth. So it'll be type Firebase Auth, and then we'll call it Firebase Auth as well. But make sure that it's with the underscore, so it's really only accessible inside of this class. And then Firebase Auth instance is what we're looking for here. So there we go, Firebase Auth instance. So now we can use this instance throughout the class as we're building. The whole reason we need a user in the first place on our app is so that we can differentiate, each person's trips. So if I have a trip coming up next week, you shouldn't see that in your upcoming trips. And that's the main reason we need these users. But the app also needs to know if you're signed in or not. So for example, when you first get into the app, you're going to see this this first page that we created in the last video. But if you're signed in, it should just automatically bring you to the home page. And also, if you are signed in and then you sign out, it should bring you back to this page. So the app needs to have some sort of state that we can control, and basically that we can check every time that the state changes for that logged in user. So we're going to do this with a stream, which we'll actually use later on at our highest level of the app. So this stream is basically just going to tell us if a user changes their logged in state. So for now, we can just have it return a string, and we want this to be the on auth state change. And this is going to return that Firebase Auth instance of the on state changed. We're actually going to map this, and go ahead and map it to the, let's see, I believe we need to put the Firebase user here as user, and then we can just return that user ID here, which there may be user ID or not, so that's why we need the question mark, because if a user is logged out, there won't be a UID, so this will just be null. So this right here will be useful later, as you'll see. But overall, just to quickly reiterate what this is doing, is when we have a state change of the user of the Firebase Auth instance here, when that state changes, so if a user logs in, the state's going to change, or if a user logs out, the state's going to change. We have this stream here that we can use later to basically change the entire look of our app, which is either going to show, the home page, or it's going to show this first view here. Let's start with the email password sign up. So these are all going to be futures. So it's going to return a future because these are all going to be asynchronous calls to Firebase to either sign up a user or sign in a user. So we can use the future here, and we'll just return strings from these. In theory, we could return the whole user object, but for now, we're just going to be returning the UIDs of these users. So this is going to be, we're going to call this create user with email and password, and that's actually already a built-in method with Firebase. So we're kind of overriding, or we're using what Firebase Auth already has, and we're just going to keep those names. Create user with email and password. All right. Now in here, we're going to, or actually this is going to take parameters, right? So when we create a user, we're going to need a email, and we're going to need a password. And then we're also going to want the username. So we'll just use a name for that. And this is going to be an async function because it's that future. All right. So it's actually pretty simple to create a new user. Really, all you need to do is we'll name this current user, because we're actually going to use that new user that's created inside this function as well. But we're just going to use that await. So this is going to be the actual call to create the user, call that Firebase Auth instance that we already created, and then just use create user with email and password. And this is going to take those parameters basically that this function is pulling in. So this is slightly confusing because we're calling this future function the same as the Firebase function, but kind of makes it easier because later we're just going to call this in our code, and pretty much under the hood of this future, we're just going to do the logic for Firebase. So anyway, email here is going to be the email, and that's that email there, and then this will be the password. So this would create our user for us. So at this point in our function, we're going to have a new user. So that's good, but now we actually want to also update that. We want to give that user its name, the username for it. And this is not automatically done, so we're going to have to do that here. Update the username. Pretty simple here. We can create a new variable user update. And pretty much this is, because since we created the user here, we're just going to now update that user with the name, since we can't create the user with a name. So this will be a user update info like that. And actually, let's just keep this name to the same. And now that we have that instance, we can use it here and just use the display name property. And that's going to equal the name that was passed in to our function up here. All right, and then we need to use await again here, because we're going to use the current user, which is that new user we just created. And we're going to use that, and we're going to update it, update the profile of it with this user information here. So basically we created a new, or we have the updated profile name here, and there are other parameters you can add. There's not too many, but name's the only one we're going to worry about now. And then once that's done, we're just going to reload that current user. And there we go. And then once that user is reloaded, we can just return that string value, which we're not, maybe depending on the logic later, we might change that to actually return the user itself, the user object. But I think for now we can just return the either the UID or that name. I guess we'll do the UID, which is just the unique ID for that user. So yeah, that's actually it for creating a new user. The only thing we would need to do is really, set up a form and call this function and pass in those 3 parameters from a form. So we'll do that in a second, but let's just go ahead and, since the sign in is so similar, let's just go ahead and actually build that. This one's even simpler, the sign in method. Still going to use the future. We'll still return a string. This one is going to be sign in with email and password. Again, we're just reusing the kind of the same naming conventions that Firebase uses. And this is not going to take the name. It's just going to be the email and password. And this is also going to be asynchronous. And pretty much this is just going to return from here the awaited Firebase Auth sign in with email and password, and we're just going to give it the email and the password. And then at that point, since we have this in the parentheses there, we can just use the UID, because this whole thing is going to be awaited. Then we'll have the UID, which will return basically as the string to this await function. So that's it. Like, signing in is a one-liner essentially. Sign out, again, is pretty simple. This we can just make. This doesn't actually need to be a future. It can just be a function, and we're going to just return the Firebase Auth, instance, and sign out. Use that sign out method there. So this one's quite simple, the sign out. All right, now let's go ahead and create the sign up view, where we're going to call these new create and sign in functions. So under our views folder here, let's do a new Dart file, and we're just going to call this the sign up view. Actually, let's do it like this. All right, and then we're going to need material and the auth services that we just created. Then we're also going to use the auto size text. All right, and that should be good for now. Let's go ahead and add that primary color in here. Again, these are going off things we did in our first view here. This primary color we're going to update to be in a central location, but we're not going to do that right now. That's going to be kind of when we do the theme style of our app, which will be in another video. So we can actually go ahead and just add a to-do here. All right, so this is going to be a stateful widget. And the reason for that is because these two pages, the sign up and the sign in, actually, and the forgot password, not sure we're going to get to that in this video, but these two pages are actually just going to be the same page, which is the page we're creating right now. And then depending on the state, which the state will either be sign up or sign in, we'll just kind of display slightly different fields. But these are enough of the same that we can do it as one page. The alternative would be kind of, to kind of make two versions of this, but then we're repeating a good bit of code. So this is the sign up view. Sign up view. Let's just create this generically to display a background color of our primary color, or yeah, of our primary color. It'll just be a background with our primary color and a, we can do the height, which is going to be that media query of context and our height. Same thing with the width. Let's go ahead and add a child in here. And we'll make sure to use that safe. Make sure to use that safe area. And then this will have a column. We'll use a column here. And then the column can also be, for now, let's just put in this column, let's just go ahead and put a text field for now. And we'll just say sign up. All right, now that we kind of have this very generic sign up, let's go ahead and actually fix up the logic on our main page here to use that stream builder, or to use that stream rather in our auth service to basically show either the welcome page or the home page, depending on the state of the user being signed in. And the reason for this, that we're going to do this first, is because within creating that, we're going to be creating an inherited widget, which will basically be at the top level of our app. And then that inherited widget will hold the auth service, which is all these functions here that we can then access anywhere in the app from that inherited widget. And the reason that we're going to do this, or the reason we would do that rather than just having the auth service on only our sign up page, is so that we could sign out from anywhere else in the app, as well as potentially sign in from pretty much converting an account from being like an anonymous account to sign in to be a regular account. Anyway, hopefully that kind of makes sense. I think you'll see as we go, it'll make a bit more sense. But go ahead over to main, and we're going to change this up a bit. So the first thing we're going to change is this this first view, which is our main view here. We're going to actually create a new stateless widget, and we can just do it in here because it's pretty much part of main. And let's call this the home controller. If you remember, we used to have the home view going there, and we changed that to be the first view just so we could build out the app with the first view there. But with this new one, we're going to actually use that stream builder here, and then down here in this builder, actually just remove that return there. We can use that auth services here, and we'll just call it auth. And that's what we're going to end up calling it throughout the actual app itself. Now, here we actually want to, this home controller will basically control if we're going to show the home page or the sign-in page. But to do that, we actually need a provider. So let's go ahead and create that real quick first. And this provider is going to be that inherited widget I was just talking about. So this will be, we're just going to call it provider. As an inherited widget, providers you can actually use to do quite a bit more, but right now we're just going to call this as an inherited widget. Let's see, there it is. For now, it's going to be kind of a very simple provider. It's going to have that auth service here as auth. And then when we instantiate this, we want to actually give it a instance of the auth. So All right, so now when we instantiate this, we're getting, we're going to take an instance of auth with it. So the way that this inherited widget is going to work is it's going to pretty much alert all of the child widgets of it that the auth state changed, and that's really all it's going to do. So, and that is kind of like how an inherited widget works. Actually, it's at a very high level, or it doesn't even need to be at a high level, but any information that it has, it can pass down to its children kind of directly, or the children can access that change directly. And that's how kind of this, or that's what this is going to work. I'll link to inherited widget or some more reading on the inherited widget, so you could maybe it'll be easier to understand just reading up on it. But yeah, this will be update should notify, and it will be the inherited widget, the old widget. And that will return true. And then pretty much we just want to have the provider here of build context. And we want that to return, the new, or that something changed pretty much. So the context inherited widget, or inherited from widget of expected type, and that type is going to be actually this provider, and it'll be as a provider. So pretty much what that means is if the provider, or pretty much what that means is this provider is going to let us know when something in our inherited widget changes. So since we're going to have this auth service here, and which is the only thing in our inherited widget, when the auth service when something changes on that, which is pretty much what our stream builder is going to be, this on state change here. When something changes on that, this provider is going to update all the widgets below it that use that same provider, or that use that same auth service version of use that auth instance on the provider, and then those instances can update accordingly. So all that to say, kind of, and this might bring it all home full circle of the use of it, is that our home controller here and the rest of our app is going to use auth, but it's going to use a version of auth that goes through this provider. So then that provider is going to pretty much hold this one instance of auth, and we can use that to build out that stream, actually listen to that stream of a state change, and then update or pretty much show either the first view or the home view accordingly. Which I feel like I'm almost not explaining this that well, but it is pretty simple once you see it. So let me just actually write this out then. So this will be a stream. We're going to use the stream builder here. And let's see. The stream is actually going to be that auth up here that we just created of the on auth state changed. It's actually going to, since it's the asynchronous builder, we're going to need to use the an asynchronous snapshot. So this will take that context, and so this asynchronous snapshot can pretty much check. We want this to check if the snapshot is in a connection state, and if our connection state equals active, then that means we're sending data. And we pretty much want to look to see if that's signed in. We'll just call it signed in. If we got data returned, and pretty much so if we don't get data returned, that's because we don't have a user ID. So that means the user is not logged in. If we do get data returned, it means we got a user ID returned. So where are we? Back on main. So that's good. Then for here, we can just either return based on this signed in variable. We can return either the first view or the home view. So if signed in is true, then we're going to do the home view, which is just home. And then if not, we're going to do that first view. All right. And if we don't have the connection state, then we can just return a circular progress bar. Now that's set up, we can actually use this home controller here to be our home controller there. And our home is actually also going to be the home controller. And the reason for this is we don't want a user to ever go to the home page unless they're signed in. So this is pretty much going to, use the home controller, check if they're signed in. If they are, it'll bring them to home. If not, it'll be the first view. And then our sign up view is going to be that new sign up view that we just created. Sign up view here, which we actually need to also import, is going to be like that one, but sign up view. All right, so the reason this is actually not working right now is because we aren't using the provider when we're building our main app up here. So to change that, actually wrap this whole material app in a new widget. And that widget is going to be a provider. That is going to be that provider. So now this provider is at the highest level of our app. And then we can give it the auth parameter that it requires, which is, an auth service, so we just need to give an instance of auth service. And now that we have that, we should be able to save and run this. And we'll see, since we're signed out right now, we're on the first page right here. So yeah, this I think this is actually the key of the whole reason we were doing the provider in the first place. I just forgot to call it, but yeah, so this provider is the highest level of our app now. And because it's an inherited widget, pretty much anywhere in the app can access this auth method of the provider, this one instance here. And that's the reason we kind of created this first, is so that we can use it in our sign up view. So moving on then from that, this is all looking good and set up. We can actually go and use it in our sign up view. Okay, so just to illustrate, or just so we could see this while we're building it, even though we're signed out right now, just go ahead and change this home controller to be our sign up view. Here's our text widget that says sign up, and let's see, we need to change that a bit. So actually this is not wrapped in a scaffold, so that's why it's kind of looking a bit funny. So from this container here, go ahead and wrap that in a scaffold. And now we should have a bit better format of it. The scaffold doesn't take a child, it takes a body. There we go. Now our sign up just looks like a normal text. All right, so now we kind of have our setup here. We're going to create a form here. So go ahead and do a form. The thing here is we actually need a key for our form. So go up here and create a key, which we'll call form key. And this is just going to be a global key of the form state. And good. So we can use this form key on our form. Have the key, form key, and then the child columns. And in here, we're going to actually, we're going to build out these lists of widgets. The inputs we're going to actually build out in a function, not up here. And that's because these are going to actually depend on the state. So let's go ahead and build that out. And it's going to be returning a list of widgets. So a list with type widgets, and it's going to be that build inputs there. Pretty much we're going to have 3 different widgets, right? Because potentially we'll have the name. So let's actually go ahead and create variables that we can use to store those values. So right after the form key, we can go ahead and do a string values of, we'll do email, password, and name. All right, now these are just going to hold the values that we input into those form fields. So here actually we can create a list that we're going to just either add elements to or not. So it'll be a list of widgets. Again, this is going to be what we're going to end up returning, is this list, which we'll just call the text fields. And to start, it'll just be empty. So let's just do the email and password first. The way this is going to work is we're going to be adding to this text fields array here, or list rather. So we can just use this add, and then the value that we're going to add is actually going to be the text form field. Yeah, we'll add some style to it, and that's going to be a text style of just really a font size, and we'll make it 22. And then we're also going to give it the decoration. That decoration is really going to make it look like this, these white boxes here, rather than just the straight line that you get out of as the default. So for the decoration, it'll be a input decoration, and a few things we're going to do with it. It's going to be the I guess we're going to use the hint text for the text of it, and that's because we want this grayed out, and then when you click on it, we want it to disappear so you can type into it. That's why we're going to use the hint rather than the label. And the hint is going to be that, I guess for this one, it will be the email. So there we go. And then the next thing, filled, will be true. That'll give us that white background. We need the fill color though to be white, and then actually the focus color also make white. And then we're going to do enabled border of an outline input border, and then just give the border style, or the border side rather, of the border side, and we want the color of that to also be white. And we want the width of this to be 0 because we don't actually want to see the outline. So we're just going to have that there. And then finally, we need the content padding, which is just going to be a constant value of edge insets only, actually, not all. That should be a point. All right, and that's kind of just the padding inside the text box itself. All right, this input decoration is going to be consistent with all of these fields that we're going to be creating. So let's go ahead and actually extract this into its own little function, or method rather. So if we do refactor and we do extract to method. We can call this the build input decoration, build sign up input decoration. That's good. And refactor that. The only thing we're going to need to change here is this email thing, or this email string. So let's just call that the, let's make that a parameter. We'll call it the hint. And we can just put the hint here. All right, and then here we're just going to need to use email. All right, cool. So that's our decoration there. And then the last thing we need is an onSaved. And for that, we're going to have the value, which will be the value of our input. And that's going to go, and we're just going to save that to be, I guess for here it's the email, and that will be equal to the value. Okay, this email is causing an error actually because these should both be actually outside of our build method here. They should be up at the highest level of our state. So now email should be working. Okay, after the email, let's just go ahead and add a another text field, and this one will be that placeholder will be password. And then this will also change to password. Now the list view, we just actually need to return this text fields list. And when we do that, you'll be able to see email and password coming up on our sign up page. Let's go ahead and add a bit of spacing in between these. So to do that, we can pretty much just use text fields dot add again, and then we're going to do the sized box, and we're going to give it that height, and the height will be we're not going to have access to our height parameter that we built up earlier, so just use a solid value of 20 should be good. Yeah, that's just a bit of spacing, so that shouldn't throw off our design too much. We'll do another one below it. So we got our email and password. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of padding around our form actually. So that will be pretty simple. Let's go ahead and make it larger, like 20. And now our email and password are looking pretty good. Looks quite much, almost exactly like this. Since we haven't really set up the state yet to be either sign up or sign in, actually I guess we could go ahead and do that right now, and then we can change the name of this, the text of this, and also add in that name one when it's sign up. So to set the state for this, we're actually going to pass the state in. So we're going to pass the state into the sign up view. And the reason for this is because then we can make our routes be sign in with that, with a parameter. It could be like the sign up view with a parameter sign in, and then it could be a sign up view instance with the parameter sign up. And that's how we can pretty much differentiate this same widget class to be used for those two different needs. So, all right, so first thing we're going to need to do is create a new or create a way of determining if we're signed in or not. So let's actually use an enum for this, and we'll call it our auth form type. And this will be, it'll just have two types. It'll be either sign in or sign up. When we create an instance of this sign up view, we want to go ahead and take a parameter which will be of that type of it'll be a parameter pretty much one of those two. So let's give it this type, and we'll call it the auth form type lowercase. Initialize it here, which will be pretty much taking our sign up view, and then it's going to be that same. All right, and then since this is actually a stateful widget, we need to pass this further down into our state. So pretty much kind of just like what we did above. We're gonna also require that we get an auth form type in here, and we'll call that the same thing, auth form type. And then when we instantiate this, we also want to, this one's a bit simpler. We're just going to take this .auth form type. All right, so now we just need to actually pass in this value when we're calling this. So back in main, for our sign up view, we can give it the auth form type of sign up. And the reason this is available here is because we're already importing that file, that sign up view. So that looks good. And then similarly, we're going to create another route here to be sign in, and this will be sign in. All right, so we got our sign up and sign in routes set. All right, that should be in. All right, actually, now that we have our routes set up, let's go ahead and move this back to be the home controller here. And pretty much we can use these sign up and sign in routes now on our first page that we already created, our first view here. So the sign up one is actually already being used. So that's if we do get started and hit create my account, we should be on the sign up page. If you want to be on the sign in page though, which I don't believe we set up yet, is going to be right here. Yeah. So for the sign in, we'll find the on pressed here and add that navigator of context, and then do the same push and replaced named route, and it will be that new sign in route that we just created. So then if we click sign in here, it would be, it's using this sign in route. So that is actually going to be different. And, but we didn't fully finish setting that up. So it's set up on that side. Now we need to set it up on our actual sign up view. Okay. So we actually want to use this auth form type to display different information. So for instance, when we're on the sign up page, we want that to say sign up. When we're on the sign in page, we want it to say sign in. So this actually, let's extract this whole sign in text here. Let's go ahead and extract this out as well to a method. And we will call this just the build. It's actually going to be build, let's say the header. Build the header text there. We're going to have pretty much, we're going to need a string here, and this will actually be the header text. And that is going to change depending on what our auth sign-in type is. So if the auth form type is equal to the auth form type of sign up, then we want to set this header text to equal create new account. And then since we just have the two types right now, we can just use else, but if we added more later, we could just add a few more if statements in here. So if it's not sign up, then that means it must be sign in. So let's set that to sign in. And again, this is for that text that's going to be up at the top. And then really we just need to use that header text here. And okay, and this actually wasn't working correctly. And that's because we didn't give the auth form type from our stateful widget to our state widget. And that's right here. That's happening right here. And because this isn't required, that's why this is not actually throwing any errors. But go ahead and just add an auth form type here of this auth form type. Now it should work. So if we click get started and do create my account, we should see the sign up view, which is create new account. That's good. And then we actually need to rerun this to get it back to our main view. But if we click the sign in button on the home page, it should say sign in. All right, good. So this is all working as we expect. Now we can go ahead and add that last conditional block here, which will be our named text field. So that's pretty much going to be just like before with the if statement, kind of like how we used it up here. We're going to have basically we're going to say if we're signing up the user, go ahead and add to this text field, this new, or add to this text field a new text field, just like these ones, and we'll just say name here, and then this value will be the name. All right, and actually after we add this, we're also going to want to add a text box, and if we remove that, we should get our one-liner. There we go. So add that in there. And if you click the sign up, you should see now we have the name there, so that looks good. All right, now we want to be able to toggle between sign up and sign in while we're on the pages, not have to reload the app. So to do that, let's just go ahead and create a little function, and we can actually do this up towards the top instead of the bottom. We'll do this above the build. So this is not going to return anything. So we can use void, and we'll just call it switch form state. And this will take a string value, which will be our state. And this is going to be the state that we want to change to. We want to reset our form key just so it's not stale when we change the state here. So just go ahead and reset that. And then so if the state that we pass in, which will be a string value, it could be if it is sign up, then we want to go ahead and change our actual, or set our actual state, which is our auth form type, to equal the auth form type of sign up. And then likewise, or since it's just the two, we can just use else, but if we end up, or if you ended up wanting to add more states than just sign up and sign in, we probably are going to need a third one for the password reset. We'll modify that when we get to it. So set state here to be the auth form type of pretty much the same thing, but for sign in. All right, now we can use the switch form state when we click a button, which will be down here. And since that button text is actually going to change, we're not going to want to put this directly into our form right here. So instead, let's go ahead and we could put it in the build inputs, but that kind of would get a bit messy. So let's just go ahead and add a new method here, and we'll call it the build the buttons. And in here, we're gonna build. This will just hold all our buttons. This is gonna hold our inputs. That could be one thing. We could, I mean, if you wanted to, you could leave it all in here, but this kind of makes the code a little bit more manageable. So because with this build inputs, essentially you could just collapse that and collapse that, and kind of makes things a bit easier to read. Similarly though, this will return a list of widgets, just like our inputs. Let's see, from here, we're going to have, I guess we'll kind of do the same thing. We're going to have a string value, which will be our, I guess we'll call this button our switch button. That button that's going to be right here is going to be this button. Is it the already have an account or new user create an account? Let's see how we can build this out. Pretty much we want to set this based on that form state. So we can say if the auth form type equals our auth type of sign in. So if it equals sign in, then we're going to set our switch button to, all right, this needs a semicolon there. We can set our switch button to equal sign in. And then if not, we can set our switch button to equal, we can set our switch button to equal, okay, no, we don't want this to say sign in, sorry. We want this to say Because if we're on the sign in page, we want that to say, create an account. Create new account probably. Because this is the button that's going to be there if we don't, if we want to go to that sign up page. So then from the sign up page, we would want the button to say have an account, sign in. All right, that should be good. And then we're also going to need to give this the new form state that we're going to want. So let's go ahead and add that. Because when we click this button, it's going to, it's going to need to give it a form state. So the new form state here is going to be the opposite of that. So it'll be sign up. And similarly, this will be sign in. All right, a bunch of errors there. That's probably expected right now. We need to return, we need to return that button. So let's create a new list because that's what we're going to return more than just that button. We're also going to return the submit button and that forgot password button. So all these buttons are going to go in this one builder here. But for now, we're just going to return the that one button. So let's go ahead and throw this. Let's go ahead and return the the flat. We'll just do a flat button here and give it the text. The text is going to be actually this switch button. So let's actually say text on that. I think that'll be easier to understand. And let's just give it light style of turning it to be white. All right, and then we just need the on pressed. And when we press it, we're going to call that function that we just created, which is the switch form state function, and we're going to pass to it this new form state. Save that, and now it should be all working. So right now, create a new account. It's saying, have an account, sign in. You click that. Now you're on the sign in page. It's saying go to create an account. All right, good. So we got that toggling nicely. Okay, we're getting quite close now. The final thing we need to do is just to add that submit button and then have it either create a new account, which we already built that function, or sign you in. And again, we already built that function. So the very last steps here, we're getting close. All right, the first thing I guess we can do is just create this button. So since we're already kind of here, we don't want to return we want to return the submit button first. So just above this. All right, yeah, this will be a raised button, but since we don't want, in our XD design, you can see we want the button to kind of take up a width of the screen. So to build a button like that, you actually need to put it in a container, or put it in a container is one way to build a button like that. Another one is to use the different amounts of padding, but with the padding on this, it's going to be kind of, or it would be a bit trickier and messier. And we've already seen how to build a button like that. So this is kind of just another way you can build a button and choose which one you like. So actually start with a container here. And then within that container, give it a width, right? So this width is going to use our media query of context, and then it will take the height, and we're going to multiply it by, let's do 0.7. So we're going to do 7. The button will take up 70% of the screen, right? I think that's looks like about 70%. But yeah, we could play around with that number if not. So then inside this container, the child of it will be that button. And then the button will pretty much take up the size of its container, or of this container, which is exactly what we want. Let's see, on pressed will be down there. And before the on press, let's just go ahead and make this button look like how we want. So we're going to need the shape here, and we'll do, again, that rounded rectangle. We've already kind of seen how to do a button like this, but that should get us a rounded button. yeah, then the color here is going to be white, and the text color is going to be that primary color. All right, that should be pretty good. Now we just need to actually put the text of it. So go ahead and, oh, the text is actually going to be the child of the button, which will be text. All right, this text we're going to put padding on, so add the padding. We'll leave it at the 8 constant there, but the text, I guess, for this is also going to be a variable, so go ahead and add another one up here. So add another variable, and this will be the submit button text. And then we can use that when we're on the sign in page. We want that to say, let's see, when we're on the sign in page, we want to say sign in, and the other one will say sign up. So pretty simple there. This should say sign in, and then when we're not, this should say sign up. Now let's just use this in this button text here. Now a little bit of style we can just add to this. We want the text style of this to be really just a font size of 20 and a font weight of 300. All right, so that should be looking good. Oh, okay, we're using the height here. This should be the width, and that will make the button actually 70% of the width, not 70% of the height. You'll notice the button's grayed out right now. That's just because we don't have an onPressed method set up. So let's go ahead and set that up. We're actually just going to make another function for this. So let's go back up where we made that void function for switching state. And after that, let's make another void function and call it submit. So this is going to be an asynchronous call because this is what's going to actually interact with those Firebase functions that we made in our auth service here. All right, so in our submit, we're going to need to check if there's basically going to be 2 things we're going to be submitting. We're either going to be submitting the sign up or the sign in. So go ahead and check first we'll do the auth type of sign in first. And so this will be if we're signing in. We actually need to get an instance of that auth, and we want to make sure that we're using the instance from the provider. We could do this by creating our auth service here, and this would work to sign us in, right? Using this auth service here because we created a new instance of it. But if you remember, as I was saying, we want to use this instance of the auth service from our provider. So we want to call our provider and basically ask it for that instance of auth. And since our provider is that, inherited widget, and everything in our entire app is inheriting from that provider widget, or not inheriting necessarily, but yeah, I mean, it is inheriting because everything is a child of this provider widget. Anywhere in our app, we can access that. So instead of calling the auth service like this, which actually we should never call anywhere else in our app, we want to use that provider, and we want to say with our context here, give us the auth method. And okay, provider is undefined, and that's because we created it here at the bottom. So all we need to do is just create this in its own file. So go ahead and make a new file, and do this under widgets, since it's going to be pretty much just a widget that's reused, and we'll call it the provider widget. And then pull this out of the main here. Sorry, I should have done this before, but here we're going to need to import we're actually going to need to import that auth services, which if you go back in main, we can find our auth services here, import that there. And then we also need to import material. All right, and now in our main, we actually need to import the provider itself. And then this provider widget, we're actually going to also need to add into our signup view. There we go. And now that new function we were building should no longer have an error for provider. All right, great. So we have that instance of our auth from our provider. Hopefully that's making hopefully that kind of shows perfectly why we use that provider. It's a kind of hard to explain, but I think now that you see that, you'll probably kind of get why we're using that. And I guess just quickly to reiterate that if you didn't use that, it would be very hard to track if the user signed in or not, because we wouldn't really, the app itself wouldn't have that signed in state, and it wouldn't know when it changed. It just wouldn't be consistent. So now this provider makes it consistent. Anyway, we want to, so when we're signing in and we hit this submit, we're going to go ahead and use the auth. We're going to wait for the auth to sign in with email and password. And then the email is going to be our email. The email and password we already saved, which are going to be on our form. So that looks good. This, if you remember, is going to return a UID. So we can just set that to be the, we can set this value to be that UID. And then we can pretty much just print that UID for now, if we just so we can see it, the UID there. This is kind of just for kind of, really we'll get rid of that. That's just kind of for, just to see it for now. And then once we're signed in, we want to move to the home page. And if you remember, and this is really just kind of reloading our app now in a way, because the home route, if you remember, is actually the home controller, which is our main app here. So, but now that we're signed in, it's going to come down here and basically just be like, okay, you're signed in. Let me give you the actual home view now. If sign in fails, it will just show us the first view again without any errors, which is something we can add in later. Is like kind of some error message or error warning. Let's see. Anyway, that should be good for sign in. If we're not signing in, that means we're signing up. So pretty much copy all that and change this to be create user with email. Email, password, and name. This will be up with new ID. And this is also returning that ID. So that looks good. Same thing, just kind of like reload the page here. This actually, since it potentially could have an error, we should wrap it in a try catch block. So if there is any error, we can see it. Let's see, take all this stuff and put it there. And then we're going to catch the error and print it. And that'll just help us debug if anything does go wrong. All right, last thing to do is just add this submit down in our button here. And if we save this, actually rerun our app. Okay, looks like I forgot a semicolon there. All right, rerun the app. We should be able to see a user should be able to sign up now. So just to show you again, this is our Firebase console. There's no user there from way back at the beginning. That's what we set up. It is set up for email. Now, if we go into the app here, and let's see if we could do this side by side, we can create a new user, which will be, we'll name it my name. I'll do dave@test.com and the password. Oh, okay. You notice how the password is showing up right here? Let's sidetrack a step and fix that because we don't want to see the password. So before even creating this, go ahead and go back into the code here and find those text fields that we were creating. Let's see, right in here. And for the password, we just want to go ahead and add obscure text equals true. And save that, and now our password will look like that. And we hit sign up here. All right, we're getting a error here in Firebase Auth. It's saying Failed assertion, line 95, email is not equal to null is not true. Okay, so the reason this isn't working is because we're not actually saving our form before we submit it. So pretty much right here above all this, we can save the form. Go ahead and do final. The form is going to be our form key dot current state, and then we can just save that form. The reason for this is that save is what's going to actually set all these values, if you remember, on these text fields are going to get set to the values that are in here. Now that we're saving it, we should be able to hit submit, and now we're signed in. Great. And just to show you in here, if we reload our Firebase console, we have our brand new user right here and our user ID, and that QTPP5F ID is what's printed out as well right here. All right, great. So we're signed in now. Let's try and sign out, and then, we're signed up. So now we're in the app. Let's go ahead and sign out of the app, and then go ahead and test our sign in. So for the sign out, let's go ahead and add another button up here next to our plus sign for now. That is actually on our home widget, I believe, is this navigation bar. We're going to need to add 2 imports here. We're going to need the provider. Actually, that might be it. We might just need the provider on our home widget. And then with that, go ahead and find where we have our, find where we have our icon buttons here, and go ahead and just add another one below this. Pretty much, let's just copy and paste the plus button one. Instead of the add, let's just use the undo button for now. When this is pressed, actually just remove that stuff. When this is pressed, this is going to be asynchronous, and we're gonna, because of that, we'll put this in a try catch as well, and we need to get that auth variable. So that means we need to import this auth service as well. So go ahead and add that in. We'll use the auth service. Auth, again, remember this is that provider. We're going to use the provider to get our auth instance. All right, let's quickly just add the catch here. All right, and then when we have our auth service, we can pretty simply await for the auth.signout method, which we already created. And then once we're signed out, we can, for now, we'll just print signed out, and that just needs a colon there. All right, great. So now we have this sign out link here. If we press this, we're back on the home page, and now we can try and sign in with our new user, which was dave@test.com, and the password was password. And if we hit sign in, great, we're signed back in, and you can see we were printed the sign in there and signed out from before. All right, great. So now the app is configured to sign up new users with their email and password, and then those users can also sign in once they create their accounts. So this is a great start to getting that authentication done. The last steps are going to be, which we'll do in another video, using that Facebook button and that Google button to sign them in. And we also need to do the forgot password. So all of that is to come. But yeah, this is definitely a good start here for the authentication. All right, ciao for now.